in the courtroom when she told a little lie, but the truth came out. Oh my, it wasn't ninjas or pirates, as she tried to claim. Jodi was the culprit, she was the one to blame. But in this silly town, where mischief's all around, Jodi's little tale became quite renowned. It's Jodi Day, it's Jodi Arias Day. Come along and join us in a playful little play. But remember, my friend, that the truth will always win in this town of make-believe, where the fun begins.
It's a
Hey!
perfect song. It's like an intro to a children's television show. And we're like, let's talk about all this blood and vaginas everywhere. All of the holes, all of the man-made and God-made holes. Let's talk about it all.
Yeah, I want to be sponsored by Suno because I have made so many songs through that AI songwriting stuff. They are getting sued. Did you know that?
What? Why? No, they're so good.
Copyright infringement. A few of the major labels have filed a copyright claim against Suno and other AI songwriting stuff because they claim they are using their songs to make their songs.
Come on, there's only so many power chords. There's only so many notes in the world. You start combining them. Every song is a riff on a different song. It's
I mean, how do musicians learn how to play an instrument? Copying.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So
good morning, everybody, by the way.
Yeah, good morning,
John.
Yeah. Now, I've been trying... I kind of want to be sponsored, so I'm having my redneck moment. Redneck moment with Nick Starro. Come on, Mountain Dew. You know you want to.
I used to drink so much Mountain Dew. As a teenager, I would keep the cans for some reason because I thought it was cool, and they were like lining my walls and all of that. I can't touch the stuff anymore. Although Code Red Mountain Dew is really good.
Okay. Now, these just recently started selling here in Sweden, and it reminds me of 7-Up without as much citrus.
Okay.
Something of the sort. And I'm down with it. I'm down with it.
Yeah, Valhalla, of course he drinks Code Red. Code Red is really good, but really unhealthy for you. You can drink one every once in a while.
Yeah, I haven't seen it here, at least. But if
I know what I'm going to have for you when you get to the treehouse. Whiskey and Code Red.
Whiskey and Code Red. Yeah, I can do that. Now, I'm just going to show you. I got new headphones. I just need to not just find the time, but find the energy.
Oh, my phone's going off. Who's texting me?
And one of these. Also, so Sunday, tomorrow, I will try to set up so I get my screens on one of these.
Nice.
Yeah. So
you look at you. You're getting a whole studio set up here.
Yeah, and something up the walls, but as for the moment, it's on my old chair.
There you go. Well, I have nothing on my walls, as you can see right now, because I've decided, since Nick will be here in a few weeks, I tore everything down and I'm renovating the whole treehouse on the interior. Not at all to support Nicholas's giant stature, but just to make it look nicer inside. And so everything is gone behind me. It's all sitting in a bin behind the chair here.
Yeah.
But dial Dave.
No, why would
anyone? Oh, my phone's going off. You know what? It might be, except this woman's messaging me about 24 hours too late, so she'll have to wait now.
Yeah. Shit happens.
Yes.
Shit happens.
You know, Mads is saying somebody that has a problem with me. Apparently, Chris Emsworth said, if you have a problem with me, send me a text. And if you don't know my number, then you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me. And I like that. And I tweeted it out the other day. And yeah, so that's what Mads is referring to. Someone that has a problem with me.
That's good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I look ready for our 4th of July. Yeah, I got Drunk Me got this for last year's 4th of July.
Nice.
So, Drunk Me buys me good stuff. Oh,
it's not the 4th yet. I'm not even in the 4th. I'll be in.
By the way, I got one of these. I have no idea what it is.
Are you gonna open it on a drunk stream?
I don't know. Because this is the last weekend, because the earnings on the YouTubes now is paid out in the end of July.
Wait, you can earn money on YouTube? How does that work?
What? No, Dave. Everything is free on YouTube.
Okay.
You know that.
All right. Good. I was a little concerned there. I thought I was missing out on something.
No, so if I'm going to have one last grief stream to get funds for the trip, today is more or less the last day. So if I'm going to have a drunk stream, it's going to be this evening. And I'm not sure I'm up for it, but
well, you can do a drunk stream and then redirect everyone into my Lego stream tonight with Valhalla.
Ooh, I can do that. Yes,
yeah.
I can.
We have
do that.
Max Muraz coming on tonight.
Nice.
Yeah, he's scary but awesome at the same time. So,
I mean, I've seen him a lot on me and Copium's streams, and he can go from almost sounding ignorant of normal things to absolute knowledge, and that's a bit scary.
I was on a panel with him I don't know 9-10 months ago or so, talking about some random person and that was trying to hide their identity, didn't want to be known. And after we got off the stream, Max started messaging me. He's like, here's his name, here's this, here's that, here's all this information. They found out about this guy who's trying to remain anonymous. It's scary how quickly he was able to come up with all this stuff.
He's good.
What's a Max really Moran? Why is he gay? You can ask him tonight, Justin.
Yes, okay. Then I will start one at around, because yours starts at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah.
Then I'll start one at 7 p.m., which is 1 a.m. my time. Yeah, that'll sure.
For you.
Yeah,
that'll work.
Yeah. What should I call my grift stream for the United States? No.
Yes. Help support my dreams of getting to the greatest country on earth.
Yeah. United States. Get me to United States. Allow me to have.
You can say the greatest country on earth. It's okay. We won't be offended.
Well, your constitution is unrivaled in the entire world. Your constitution is what every other country on this planet needs to have, but don't get. Your founding fathers knew what they were doing.
Yeah, too bad we don't anymore know what we're doing.
I've seen this in the different trials and how people don't appreciate the due process, rule of law, and stuff like that. Many Americans don't know how privileged you are to have that constitution. And it's so sad. But talking about sadness.
Oh. How far did we get last week, by the way? I was in Wisconsin, so I didn't watch anything. Is he on redirect again, or is this cross? Or
this is still cross or recross. Okay. I don't know. But I backed up a bit because I wanted you to listen to one of the because the angry elf has been a bit obnoxious. Who'd know? Who knew?
Yeah. Who would have thought, right?
Yeah,
It's a
but
left field.
Yeah, but here, what he did here, that's good. So
right.
let's go. Let's see.
Two different things I did.
But that's your experience, though. That's what you carry with you everywhere you go, right?
Yes, sir.
And the only new thing that's added here is the report, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you're telling us that what your opinion as a neuropsychologist is based on a reading of a report, correct?
And my knowledge of the brain.
And your knowledge of the brain, and you've indicated that if you really wanted more explanation as to this particular issue, you would go to an expert yourself, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Wait, what?
Yeah, this neuropsychologist, they talked previous about this since the brain was mush and the consistency of pudding or something. In order to actually go into what happened, he himself would go to an expert.
That's not good.
Yeah.
He's basically deferring to the medical examiner that testified that his brain was mush. Because where I left it off was that he's like, I've seen traumatic brain injuries where that part of the brain has been, holes have gone through it and the person can still get up and walk around and function. That was the essence of his testimony.
But after 2.5 hours of angry elf talking about everything and nothing, he got him to this point where he acknowledged that if he actually wanted to know more, he himself would go to an expert.
I don't know if he just said yes to be done with the questioning or what, but that's not good for the defense. That's not good for this expert. He was doing really well before that.
Yeah. So
all right. Well, we can't rely on this guy. We have to go to someone else.
Yeah. Let's see.
Redirect.
Redirect.
You may.
They have had so many sidebars. There must have been 20 sidebars on this day alone.
What do they want to?
Take a 10-minute recess.
Oh, now they're going on a recess.
So again, it's 4:20
They got to argue about something.
now, according to this clock. So it will be 4:30.
Oh, it's 4:20. What kind of break is this?
I don't know. Ask Valhalla.
According to this clock, adjust your timepieces accordingly. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
I'm curious to see if the jury convicts this woman or not. I'm so on the fence about it.
With regard to, you've indicated, as we've been going, that you believe that post-traumatic stress disorder is characteristic of these tests, correct?
It's consistent.
Consistent, right? And
Yes,
you
sir.
know that was...
I thought he was done.
Well, I think this is outside of the jury's presence and they're doing some voir dire on something.
Ah, okay.
I'm pretty sure, but I don't know.
Dr. Samuel's result. You knew that, right?
I think I did know that from Dr. DeMarte's report.
Right. So you did know that. Were you also familiar with the rest of the documentation where Dr. Samuels actually indicates that this case could be a case of personality disorder, NOS, that needed to be investigated? Did you know anything about that?
No, sir.
You had conversations with the defense attorneys, didn't you?
Objection beyond scope.
Overruled.
Didn't you?
Okay, so it is in front of the jury.
Interesting.
Yeah. This is.
So why is he going again?
I have no idea.
So there could be a situation. I've had this done. It's happened once where the state called a witness. I did cross-examine. The state did a rebuttal, and then we went on a break. And while we were on the break, I was thinking to myself, oh, you know what? I really wish I would have asked this one more question or something like that. And I went back to the judge and I asked permission to recall the witness and asked just some follow-up cross-examination real quick. And the judge is like, all right, yeah, that's no problem. And so it happened. And that might have been what this was. The objection might have been about something. And Angry Little Elf was like, listen, I can recall him, or you can just allow me to reopen cross and dive into it a little bit more. And so maybe that's what happened here.
And the sidebar. Now, last Saturday, I had issues with this video jumping back a few seconds, so we had a bunch of deja vus, but I don't think this is one of them.
Okay. Was that in the editing, or was that just because YouTube was being weird?
I have no idea.
Huh. Okay. I wasn't able to watch any of it. I was still on the road trying to get to
lucky you,
Zach's
it was so boring.
Was it? I'm sorry.
About,
I was hanging around Zach's house when you guys were watching this.
Yeah,
an example about Janine DeMarte, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, they gave you information about Janine DeMarte, right?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, that information that they gave you about Janine DeMarte was the reason that it caused you to come in here and indicate that she was not trained with regard to some of these tests, right?
Partially.
Well, you talked about her report, right?
Yes.
And you
see, and now it jumps.
I'd have to go back and look at the report. I mean, I didn't state that. I'm trying to think if that's still accurate. There's nothing in the report.
See?
I'd have to go back and look at the report. I mean, I didn't state
I don't
that.
know if it's
I'm trying to
in
think
the
if that's
original
still
or if
accurate.
it's
There's
in
nothing in the report that would have indicated that. I have to go back and look at how she interpreted the MMPI and TSI and to see if in the report she indicated that those were no.
Is the clock still
I
going?
need to retract. In her report, she talked about a floating profile, and that was the reason the MMPI indicated borderline personality. So that would not be correct. And that would be a part of the suggestion that about either training and other things.
So when you told us a different answer earlier, that's your mistake then, right?
What was the different answer?
The previous answer to the question was that there was nothing in report or anywhere else, anything that suggested that Dr. Janine DeMarte did not have the sufficient training with regard to these tests. Do you remember telling us that?
That was,
Yes or no?
I don't remember saying it the way you just did. That was a question about the TSI, and I indicated.
All right, with regard to the TSI, weren't you asked about that question involving, no? There was nothing either in her report, there was nothing in any other data that suggested to me that she was not trained in this. Do you remember telling me that?
No, sir.
You don't remember saying that to the jury previously?
Not about all the other tests.
No, I'm talking about this particular test involving the floating profiles. Do you remember telling us that?
Objection asked and answered.
Oh, do you remember telling us that?
That there was nothing in her report about the floating profile?
Sir, we talked about her report.
Yes, sir.
Janine DeMarte's report, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that I asked you with regard to her report, whether or not there was anything in that report that suggested to you that she didn't know or lacked the training with regard to these?
Answer reflected the TSI. I don't recall you asking me about the floating
All right,
profile
so
or
it's
the other
about the
thing.
TSI then.
Correct.
And so in this, and the TSI, is this?
Answer reflected the TSI. I don't recall you asking me about
That's weird.
the floating
All right,
profile
so
or
it's
the other.
about indicated to us as part of the questioning that part of the reason that you believe that she lacked the training with regard to these scales or this test was based on what the defense attorneys told you, right?
Yes.
But now you then want to talk about something else, right? About some other test, right?
I thought you were now generalizing it to the other tests.
Do you want to? No. My question to you is, isn't it true that now you started to talk about the MMPI, right?
I thought that's what you asked me.
No,
If I
then you thought
misinterpret-
wrong then, right?
Evidently, I'm not clear exactly what you're asking me.
So the only test where you believe that she didn't have any training with,
Yeah,
no,
if I
then you thought
misinterpret-
wrong then, right?
Evidently, I'm not clear exactly what you're asking me.
So the only test where you believe that she didn't have any training with,
Did you ask again?
and
No,
with regard
it's
to the
never ending.
TSI, so that we're clear,
This trial is never ending, ever, ever, ever.
Oh,
Welcome,
it went on for a grand total of 57 or 58 days.
Yeah.
Let me remind you, the Young Thug trial is at day 99.
Nick likes these long, never-ending trials.
Yeah, but out of these 99 days, let's see here. Thugger Daily did, let's see here. Day 100 is this Monday. And he broke down George Glanville's court schedule over the past 7 months, starting November 27th, 2023. 63 full days, 34 half days, 3 days cancelled after the judge took bench, 59 days off. And out of these 63 full days, 10 to 12 have been hearing days without the jury present. No wonder that trial takes forever when there's almost as many days off as there are full trial days. And George Glanville blames the defense for prolonging it. It's absurd.
This trial was just ridiculously long because they had so many witnesses, and this angry little elf likes to cross-examine people and yell at them for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
When 10 minutes will suffice.
Yeah, I mean, 10, 15 minutes of cross-examination to get the point through and then move on. But here we are.
To the report?
TSI.
No.
I'm talking about the TSI only.
Oh,
right?
And could you ask again?
And with regard to the TSI, so that we're clear, there's nothing in the report or any other data that suggests she needed training, she being Janine DeMarte.
Not in the report, that is correct.
And in any other data that you received, correct?
I think that's likely correct because I don't recall records that it would indicate that.
But because of what the defense attorneys told you, now you do have an opinion that she lacked training, right?
In part, also in part to the interpretation of the TSI.
Sir, do you remember being asked that question by the jury?
By the jury?
Yes. And you don't remember being asked this question about the jury about whether or not why you thought Janine DeMarte lacked training? Do you remember being asked that by the jury?
Yes, I do.
And do you remember your answer?
I think so.
And do you remember that after that there was follow-up by defense counsel?
Yes, sir.
And the issue was laid out that you actually talked to them, right?
Yes, sir.
And at that time you indicated, oh, it was because of what they told me that I decided, or I realized that she lacked training. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, sir.
You also talked about compensation for the case.
Jodi is over this case. She looks bored of it.
This case,
Yeah.
you are getting paid for this case, right?
I'm not. Our institute, well, theoretically, our institute is.
Well, while you're out here, you're getting paid your wage, right?
That is correct.
How much do you make a year?
I make $117,500.
And your wage is being paid today when you came out here, right?
That is correct.
So the institute, it's not like you're not getting paid to come in here though, right? In other words,
That's a bit far-fetched. I mean, he could either be here or at the institute working. He gets the same salary. So this is more or less pro bono for the defense, I would assume.
That's not that much. If adjusted for inflation, it is 100 and wait, where am I?
That's the equivalent of about 180,000. Or no, this is
oh wait, hang on.
13 years inflation plus 30%.
156,000, 157,000. That's not that much, actually.
No,
It's
and definitely not for an expert witness.
Mm-mm.
I mean, the research is done, the time on the stand, and everything. He's like a $5,000 to $10,000 witness, but he's not getting paid for it. So this is This is just stupid.
Yes.
You are getting paid whether you're there or you're here. Your time, even though you're still getting paid, your time is still going to be billed
Again, I don't know why.
for the time that you were here, right?
Yes, the institute bills.
And how much for your time are we going to be billed? What is the hourly wage that is going to be billed?
It's $250 an hour. You're talking about for today? Because
For
it changed.
today in court as you testify.
It's $250 an hour, or it maxes at $2,500 a day.
I'm just saying, chat, that if you regard me as the equivalent of an expert witness, I'd love to have $250 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I would be satisfied with $25 an hour.
Do you remember that you previously testified today in court as you testify?
It's $250 an hour, or it maxes at
And it jumps
$2,500
again.
a day.
Do you remember that you previously testified in other proceedings involving your work? Do you remember testifying?
Always.
Objection beyond the scope.
Approach.
It jumps all the time, and I don't know why. Because I don't think Vielhammer would do this mistake. I think this is the original.
It might be.
Remember testifying in the O'Rourke case that, on cross-examination, that you no longer treat patients.
I'm not sure if that,
Remember testifying in the O'Rourke case that, on cross-examination, that you no longer treat patients.
That's weird.
I'm not sure if that was in the O'Rourke case, in another case, but yes.
Well, 648, take a look at the bottom paragraph.
Yes, sir.
It indicates that that's what you testified to, right?
Yes, sir.
And it indicates that you devote all your time to consulting work relating to your specialty, right?
Yes.
This is part of your specialty, correct? Testifying.
It's one part.
When you indicated that you devote all of your time to consulting work, weren't you indicating that the majority of your money came from testifying?
Oh, no. It's never been that way. It's always been a small part of what I do.
But you have testified in different jurisdictions, right?
Yes, sir.
One of the other things that you talked about was that in terms of the trajectory, that you could never be 100% sure as to what the
I love the
trajectory could be,
experts that
right?
fire back. It's like, I'm getting paid to be here just the same as you, counselor.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be the standard answer.
Yes, that should be.
You
that-
get paid
that
to
should be standard.
yeah. You get paid to be here? Yeah, same as you.
Mhm.
You also get paid to be here. It's that what's his name from the Johnny Depp? You're just searching for 15 minutes of fame? Well, so do you.
Yeah, oh yeah. I could say the same of you. Wait, what?
What?
2022.
Oh yeah, he has been not disbarred, but he cannot practice anymore.
Yeah, but it's not related to this case.
Precisely.
To the other, correct?
They do a variety of things. Yes,
Pardon?
they do a variety of things. Yes.
And you're aware that to do trajectory, they actually have rods that go in what is perceived as the entrance wound to where it actually, they believe the bullet may have come direct,
Yes, I have
right?
seen that.
But you don't do that sort of work, right?
No, sir.
You were also asked, well, in terms of the bleeding that was associated with this particular case, you indicated that in terms of the bleeding, couldn't it also be, in your experience, that the reason that there wasn't any bleeding along the track or where the shot to the head was because Mr. Alexander was already dead at the time he was shot, right?
That's what was asked.
And the answer is he could have been already, given your experience, he could have been dead at the time he was shot. And that would explain the lack of blood, right?
Yes, sir.
You also indicated that you really hadn't heard about this case prior to a couple of weeks ago. In other words, the facts of this case, or know anything about the case. Do you remember the jury asking you about that?
Yeah, they asked when I got involved. I said last November. I hadn't known I was testifying in this case until like a week and a half ago.
Judge, may we approach, please?
That's not what he said, Judge. That's going to be the sidebar. He's gonna want to try to impeach him based off testimony transcripts. It's not going to go far. This is her name, her attorney's name, Nurmi. Look
Yeah,
at Jody's already bored. Go back to your coloring book, Jody.
Oh, my neighbor is cutting my grass. That's nice of him. He has one of these big lawnmowers. I have roughly just under an acre of grass on, so I don't want to do that with a push mower.
Nick, how do you feel about men wearing skirts and boots?
Scots?
Skirts and boots.
No, that's Scottish people. Scottish men. So, why do you ask?
It just popped up on my feed. This is guy wearing skirts and boots. I love jury questions. I'm in New York. You guys don't get to ask. Well, you guys don't even televise your trials. New York is all kinds of messed up in so many ways. No one can see the trial going on, and the jury doesn't get to ask questions. But I love jury questions too. We have those in Michigan. I had many jury questions in the last trial I did, and they were informative. As an attorney, I love having jury questions because it's a glimpse inside of what the jury's thinking, and it's helpful for the case.
Yeah.
Free mustache rides offered by Salvador. All right, ladies or gents, whoever's interested, just shoot him a text.
So one of the things that you were telling us about was that you were familiar with people who get shot in the head, correct?
Somewhat.
And you were also telling us that with regard to these individuals, you were telling us that unless they get shot in a very specific way, they are still able to ambulate, correct?
In general.
And sir, all of this information that you were giving to us involved you reading some articles, right?
Plus the,
Correct?
in general.
And sir, all of this information that you were giving us is, and then you have some articles that you read, correct?
3 cases, articles read, workshops attended.
And workshops that you attended did not have any cadavers there, right?
That's correct.
So really what you, in terms of your knowledge of what you have here, would you agree that in terms of experience, your experience is lesser than an individual who actually conducts the autopsies and actually sees the effects of the gunshot wounds?
Objection foundation is to experience.
Overruled.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please go back to the jury room for approximately 10 minutes. Please
it?
remember the admonition. Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez?
Your name, sir?
Kevin Daniel Horn.
And you're the individual that...
Daniel Horn again.
Huh.
That's the medical examiner. It's
Yeah,
the square
he's the
jaw.
one. Yeah, that the brain was scrambled and he couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
that conducted the medical examination.
But wait a minute, wasn't he on?
Great success. That's very racist of you.
It's not a skirt, it's a kilt.
And the difference being?
It's more cloth on a kilt.
Okay. So it's a dress. Got it.
It's also a blanket. You can also use it as a tent.
With the what is it, the grand kilt or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. I don't think they make them like that anymore. I think they're pretty much just skirts.
Thank you, Indigo. Thank you so much.
I didn't realize it was all 4th of July themed.
Yeah.
I would have worn my stuff.
But wasn't Mr. Horn on day 53 or 52? Why is he on again? Is it to refute the rebuttal?
Are you concerned that we're getting a
Repeat.
replay? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but we'll see.
Travis Alexander, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibits number 653 and 654, see if you recognize me.
Yes.
Where are they?
They are photographs of the base of the Travis Alexander's skull.
And did they also indicate or show the entry wound of the bullet?
The entry and the exit, yes.
I move for the admission of exhibit number 653 and 654.
No objection.
653 and 654 are admitted.
He's wearing a different tie on day 53, so it's not it's not repeated. So he is there to rebut.
This
Dr.
is like
Kaufman.
back and forth, back and forth. This is
One
what
of the things that you previously told us.
Yeah, because I didn't know you could do that.
I mean, you're not really supposed to unless there's really good cause for it. Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be able to call rebuttal and then rebuttal and then rebuttal and then rebuttal. Like the same
Yeah.
two guys going back and forth. Courts generally don't allow that unless there's some really compelling reason for it.
Yeah.
Was that the trajectory of the wound? Sir, one of the things that you previously told us was that the trajectory of the wound, trajectory of a bullet, what can account for that? What is it what does that indicate to you?
Means the person may have already bled out from another injury or may have actually been deceased.
And the reason that you can say that he may have been deceased is why?
Just the lack of hemorrhage within the wound and the lack of vital reaction to the injury.
So, and if I remember right, you previously indicated that the heart stops pumping at the time of death.
And the lack of vital reaction to the injury.
So, and if I remember right, you previously indicated that the heart stops pumping at the time of death, and so that may account for that also, correct?
Yes.
Let's look at. Thank you.
This video is all kinds of messed up.
Yeah. It's,
What is
Puffy shirt.
this right here?
That is the entry point of the projectile into the right anterior fossa, which is the front part of the skull.
And what is the part of the brain that lays in this particular area?
The right frontal lobe.
Take a look at exhibit number 654. Is the part of the brain that lays in this particular area?
The right frontal lobe.
it's unnerving that it keeps jumping.
Take a look at exhibit number
Yeah, it's
654.
really
We have two arrows
Day
that are
54.
pointing. Why was it significant enough to have those two arrows pointed?
Yeah. Let's try to find it on court TV.
Let's see. What time frame are we in here?
We are at 5:33.
Let's see. Oh, wait, here we go. Okay. I'm gonna send you a link to another stream of it. I'm at 7:29 in the stream where Daniel Horn just starts again, 7:30, if you want to use that one. And then we can see if it jumps around at all. I don't think that it does.
Because I'm watching court TVs,
This
and
is,
I don't see Dr. Horn being in between Geffner and Hayes.
The link I sent you at 7:30, Dr. Horn is called up again. Like almost right at 7:30 and 0 seconds. He's sitting on the stand and he says, "Hi, I'm Dr. Horn again. I'm here to sit in my puffy shirt and very dated tie, even dated for 2013 standards."
7:33.
7 hours, 30 minutes. You see it?
Yep, see it.
Okay, so the audio will be a bit worse, but it shouldn't clip. It shouldn't skip.
All right, let's try it.
You're the individual that conducted the medical examination of Travis Alexander, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibits number 653 and 654, see if you recognize them.
Yes.
What are they?
They are photographs of the base of Travis Alexander's skull.
And do they also indicate or show the entry wound of the bullet?
The entry and the exit, yes.
I move for the admission of exhibit number 653 and 654.
The pattern in the style, hospice just. Pattern in the style is early 2000s. Hospice just was asking what makes a tie dated. It's the pattern and the style, sometimes the color. But that's early 2000s tie. And just with the square pattern and all that. I have some from the early 2000s, and I don't wear them right now. We'll wait for that style to come back.
Yeah, but here's what's cool here is here's the difference between a video of before and after Vielhammer has done his magic.
Oh,
the
yes,
sound,
definitely.
Yeah, just that we have to tell Vielhammer that that particular day 54 of the Jodi Arias-trial is really, really jumpy.
I think Ghost is attracted to this witness. You guys should look into him, Dr. Handsome.
You should.
Find out where he is, Ghost.
No objection.
653 and 654 are admitted.
Yeah, listen to that sound. Vielhammer did amazing work with his videos.
Sir, one of the things that you previously told us was that the trajectory of the wound. Sir, one of the things that you previously told us was that
That's the same thing.
the trajectory of the wound.
That was the same thing. It does the same thing. It must have been the original
Trajectory of the
stream.
What can account for that? What is it that is that? What does that indicate to you?
Means a person may have already bled out from another injury or may have actually been deceased.
And the reason that you can say that he may have been deceased is why?
Just the lack of hemorrhage within the wound and the lack of vital reaction to the injury.
So, and if I remember right, you previously indicated.
Well, if it's still jumping, I will go back to Vielhammer.
Well, let's see. Let's play it a little bit more. Let's see if because
That the heart stops pumping at the time of death.
And the lack of vital reaction to the injury.
Yeah.
So, and if I remember right.
Yeah, so it is the original.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll go back to Vielhammer then. It's not on him. It is what it is.
$53. This is what down here?
That is the center of the base of the skull. It's actually overlying the nasal cavity.
And the reason that we had arrows pointed here was why?
Well, normally there's intact bone there. There's a plate there, and it has been torn away by the bullet that has begun to tumble and deform. So that's why we have a larger exit point and a smaller entry point.
One of the things that you indicated was that the brain had the consistency of tapioca, I think was the way you...
Yes. Pudding, yes.
Yeah, pudding. If it had the consistency of this pudding and the frontal lobe is here, is that what
Examine him
I
after
know
he
it would be
was
the whole
dead.
brain, but in terms of the frontal lobe, would that also have the consistency of tapioca pudding?
Yes, the entire brain was decomposed, yes.
And is that one of the reasons that did that hinder you in attempting
Decomposed.
to find out what a trajectory was?
Yes, in addition to lack of hemorrhage in the wound to begin with. If the hemorrhage had still been there, I might have been able to identify that, even in a decomposed brain. But there was really no hemorrhage, and the brain was uniformly green-gray and soft.
And if there is no hemorrhaging there, that's what you previously indicated, could indicate that he was already dead.
Yes.
And if the bullet goes in this direction and the frontal lobe is there, is it your opinion, even though the brain was in that tapioca pudding kind of state, that you can at least give us an indication as to what the trajectory was? And I know previously you indicated something about simple geometry.
Yes, if you draw a line straight from the right front part of the head towards the left cheek, which is in this area here.
Go ahead and draw the line if you can. I don't know exactly how to work it.
This has nothing to do with refuting the prior witness's testimony.
Trajectory is this way,
Yeah.
and the cheek is in this location.
Yeah, because prior witness stated in his experience, even people who has been shot through the brain still can have some motor function.
Yeah, and this witness is testifying that the brain was pudding because it had decomposed, not that that was its state at the time of the shooting. So prosecutor Angry Elf is confusing the issue.
Yeah, because, but I mean, there are plenty of examples of people being shot in the head who survives and is walking around like normal. I mean, in the Young Thug trial, they had a witness who has had half his head shot off and still walking around.
Yeah.
So the bullet ends up here. So you can see that it enters the skull here. And the reason why we have a larger fractured exit point is because the bullet has begun to tumble and deform, and you get a larger exit as the bullet is deformed by the bone.
So it isn't a situation where the bullet then goes down in this direction, but it actually keeps going this direction,
Yes,
correct?
it goes down below the skull into the face.
And if it goes down in that direction, do you have an opinion as to what going this direction,
Yes, it
correct?
goes down below the skull into the face.
And if it goes down in that
That's
direction,
really
do you have an
annoying.
opinion as to what?
Nothing, because he was already dead.
Okay.
It's the first wound, and it's passing through his frontal lobe.
Portion of his face.
If it had been the last wound, areas of brain even away from the frontal lobe, but this person would have collapsed.
Is there something to a bullet involving, for example, concussive effect? In other words, not just the item that's going through, but is there any sort of, for lack of a better term, radiation of energy that goes from there?
The bullet, as it passes through something soft like brain, will create what's called a temporary cavity. And you see that in ballistic gelatin when you test fire a bullet through gelatin. You see it in the ballistics labs. And it's the same concept in the brain. You'll get a very large open area that squashes the brain around it into the skull around it. And then that will collapse back down. And it's the same concept in the brain. You'll get a very large open area that squashes the brain around it into the skull around it. And then that will collapse back down, and you may be able to see a wound track, but in this case we don't. But it damages areas of the brain away from the frontal lobe. Even only passing through that one part of the brain, other areas of the brain are involved and damaged.
And so if this was the first shot, what is your opinion as to whether or not Mr. Alexander would have been incapacitated?
He would have been incapacitated.
And would this have been an...
Yeah, and there's also an example I saw it on one of these documentary channels about a decade ago. A guy who was a bit slow, but fully functioning, or if it was a woman, I don't remember. And then for some reason needed a CAT scan of the brain.
Yeah.
And it was more or less completely filled with fluid, and the entire brain was at and around the skull, but still functioning. So you never know.
I wanted to, I can't remember. Why is it that they ended up going with the story that he was shot first and then stabbed after? And I think it had something to do with the statement that Jodi had made. Basically, she just screwed herself by making that statement. And now the defense is caught up in this narrative that has to be true. And now it's bringing up all these issues. I can't remember what it was, though, in this trial that brought up that timeline, that the shooting first and then the stabbing. I just can't remember. Do you remember?
Well, that is her explanation. Well, it became her explanation after she abandoned the It Was Ninjas deal.
Yeah, but why wasn't it that order?
She shot him, and then he kept going after her, and then she did all the stabby.
I just can't remember why it was that way. Oh, I think because she said that he started getting angry and she ran from him.
Yeah.
But why couldn't she run from him and grab the knife instead of the gun? I don't remember. I just think it was dumb.
Or why didn't she run out the door instead of running into the closet to get his gun?
Well, she couldn't run out the door because he was already dead. I mean, we were dealing with a dead person, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Immediate sort of reaction, seconds?
Yes,
And by seconds, how many seconds would you indicate?
a second or two. He would have collapsed to the ground and been unresponsive.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Maybe because there was no blood in the
Cross-examination.
closet. If she had stabbed him first in the shower and there was no blood in the closet, but that's where she ran to get the gun,
Yeah.
maybe it wouldn't make sense. It would make more sense if she ran to the closet first to get the gun, then shot him, and that way all the blood was in the hallway and in the bathroom later. I don't know. It just seems odd.
Dr. Warren, how long does blood stay in a person's brain after they've died?
If there's an injury there should be blood visible.
Well, if there's no injury in the brain, how long is it going to take for somebody, for that brain, if somebody's bleeding out, how long is it going to take for that blood to leave the brain?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you talked about the fact that there was no hemorrhage that you could see when you were looking through these. For that is the fact that maybe there was no blood left, right? And when you talk about how you saw that there was no hemorrhaging, one of the reasons that you're giving us for that is the fact that maybe there was no blood left, right?
That he'd bled out from other injuries, yes.
Okay, so how long does it take to get to that point?
There's really no hemorrhage left in this track.
My question is, how long is it going to take?
With his injuries, seconds.
So in seconds, you expect that there is absolutely no blood left in the brain?
Yes.
Okay, and also with regard to, we've talked about this brain and its consistency of tapioca, right?
How does that question help their
And
case?
regardless of what the consistency of tapioca, you this brain and its consistency of tapioca, right? And
moment here.
regardless of what the consistency of tapioca, you were able to actually take slices of it, weren't you?
Not slices. We put the brain in a pan to weigh it. And really this is like a liquid, almost a very soft, when I said I'm sectioning a decomposing brain.
So now you're telling me that it's completely liquefied?
I didn't say that. I said it was the consistency of pudding. It's very soft.
Well, if you didn't have it in this pan, it was going to run off the pan, like liquid, right?
It's like a sludge. Yes, it's a pudding. I didn't say that. I said it was the consistency of pudding. It's very soft.
Well, if you didn't have it in this pan, it was going to run off the pan, like liquid, right?
It's like a sludge. Yes, it's a pudding.
Okay, so you don't talk about this pudding or this sludge in your report, do you?
Yes, I do.
When you talk about the autolyzed brain?
I call it autolyzed. That's what that means.
And autolyzed has different degrees, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so just because you're talking about an autolyzed brain, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be liquefied, right?
I didn't call it liquefied.
Okay, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be liquefied, does it?
When it's autolyzed, it's very soft and very fragile, and pudding-like is most of the time what I see in an autolyzed brain. Yeah.
That wasn't my question. My
But that's
question was,
after the
when we're
fact.
dealing with an
Focus on the
autolyzed brain,
important
there are
stuff.
different degrees.
Sorry, what?
I said, but that's after the fact. It's after it's decomposed. Focus on the important stuff. She's asking like all the wrong questions.
Yeah.
So if you term it, and you, as you did in your report, autolyzed brain, that doesn't mean that it's going to be liquefied, right? Necessarily.
I didn't call it liquefied.
I know.
It's,
I'm asking you, in an autolyzed brain,
Yes.
if we're talking about autolyzed brain, are there different degrees of having an autolyzed brain?
yes, I answered that. There are.
Okay, so then answer me this. If there's different degrees, just because you have an
Riddle
autolyzed
me
brain and
this.
you're looking at an autolyzed brain, does it necessarily mean that that autolyzed brain is going to be liquefied?
What the hell is an autolyzed
No.
brain?
Okay, so because there's varying degrees, correct?
Yes.
And in this case, the degree, you talk about medium decomposition, don't you?
Yes.
And so you're not talking about completely decomposed?
Well, medium decomposition is pretty far along.
Well, if we're talking about medium, isn't there a little, medium, and a lot?
Right.
The thing that is completely decomposed, you know what that is? It's gone.
So she's trying to make a point. I don't think she knows what she's talking about.
No.
He is trying not to answer the questions. That's obvious. But what
Yeah.
she's essentially getting at, I think, an autolyzed brain, a brain that's decomposing, you could just say that, or partially decomposed or decomposed brain, has various stages. It doesn't start off as a solid and go straight into gaseous, right? And he's just fighting her, and she's not competent enough to just step back and cross him appropriately. She's just floundering.
Yeah. For instance, a completely decomposed body is either a mummy. Well, no, it's not a mummy.
No, it's not a
because
mummy.
that
A
is-
mummy
That,
is-
that is dry. That is just dry.
Yeah.
That's a skeleton. A completely decomposed body is a skeleton. Everything is gone. So medium decomposed means it's still there. It's not gone, more or less.
Advanced would be a skeleton.
Okay.
So medium is pretty much a liquefied, bloated body. which is
Okay,
what
so we're back to
doing.
liquefied again.
Yes, the body is liquefying, in the stages of liquefying.
Okay, did you not just tell us that the brain was not liquefied?
It's a pudding, so it's a form of liquid. It's not like water. It's
Okay.
like it's an oozing liquid.
Okay.
It's like
And
pudding.
so, sorry, go ahead.
It's like a
It's 3
pudding.
days,
Oh, like
right? He
that.
was
Okay.
decomposing in the shower.
And
for 3
so
days.
when you were able to take this brain and put it into a pan, you talk about doing these sections, right?
Cutting it with a knife.
Yes. And so in cutting it with the knife, you were able to actually look at the slices, right? Weren't you able to?
That's what I usually do.
Okay. And so it wasn't so pudding-like that you couldn't see the difference
I'm gonna
as
try
you're
to
putting
cut
the
some
knife
pudding
in,
with a
see the
knife.
slices, right?
They're not slices in the best use of that term. I mean,
Poulet
to
pudding,
cut
you
through what is there, pull it
Oh,
apart,
poulet,
and
yeah.
look through it to see if I'm missing bullet fragments or hemorrhage or
What is flan?
scarring or other things.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is based on the limitations of the exam that I have, I didn't see any of those things.
Okay.
All this
So
brain
perfect.
talk
What
is
you
making
just
me
said,
hungry for flan.
I think helps explain what we're trying to talk about here. You're able to put a knife through it and pull it apart, right?
Yes,
And when you can pull it apart, you're able to then take a look at what you're pulling apart, right?
yes,
And you do that for several sections, right?
yes,
Okay. And so when you, in these several sections, you weren't able to see any foreign bodies, right?
that's right,
There was no evidence of that.
right.
So when you talk about this bullet tumbling and deforming, it certainly wasn't exploding, right?
Not exploding,
And
no.
not breaking apart.
No, not fragmented,
And there was no fragments in the rest of the brain, right?
not that I found.
So just this one track or this, well, you couldn't see a track, right?
I could not see a track through the brain, that's
Okay.
correct.
Even though you were able to slice it and pull the slices apart, you were not able to see a track. Is that what you're
That's
telling
right.
us?
Yes,
And you were able
Okay,
to see
I
enough
kinda
that
get where she's going.
you couldn't see any apparent trauma, right?
couldn't see any hemorrhage or a wound track in the brain, yes, it's true.
Oh, so was he not shot in the head? This is undermining his contention that if Travis was shot in the head, he wouldn't be able to move afterwards.
Well,
which is
you had the entry wound and then the lodging here. So it went somewhere from here down here.
Mhm.
So
yeah,
that,
but the prior witness testified that he's seen people with brain injuries that are still able to function. And
Yeah.
this witness is unable to tell the extent of the trauma to the brain because of the bullet. He just sees a pile of flan afterwards that he was able to slice, but not determine any sort of path or trajectory.
yeah.
She's flicking. What? You talking about Jodi? Is that what Jody's doing right now?
And you talked about this shock theory, right? That when a bullet goes in projectile in their frontal lobe, they will automatically be incapacitated due to this shock wave.
I'm talking about my experience with similar cases, yes.
So just in your experience?
Yes.
Okay. So you're not familiar with any research then?
Not explicitly today, no.
Okay, so you're not familiar with research
So it's
that
just
talks
anecdotal.
about
Wow.
specifically people getting hit with projectiles in their frontal lobe and not being incapacitated. Are you aware of that?
No.
So you don't do that extra research as a part of your job?
No.
And you don't keep up with the current research that tells us about projectiles and brains?
I've read articles, but no, I can't quote any articles to you today.
Okay. And so
Interesting.
based on what you're telling us is that every time the right frontal lobe has a projectile go through it, regardless of the caliber, it's going to immediately incapacitate.
And that's been my experience with these cases, yes.
Okay, and that's been your experience, but frontal lobe has a projectile go through it, regardless of the caliber, it's going to immediately incapacitate.
And that's been my experience with these cases, yes.
Okay, and that's been your experience, but not looking outside your experience, right?
Well, my colleagues' cases as well, similar.
All right, I'm showing you what's been in as 654. This is the arrows, right?
Yes,
And you're talking about entry and exit.
yes,
And so basically, and when we talk about entry and exit, what we're also talking about is the fact that it's also going down. Is that correct?
yes, it goes down into the face.
Down,
Okay.
down.
And actually, would it be better if we do it that way? Because it's down and to the left, right?
Yes,
Okay, so it goes in at this front corner and then it's out. And when we see this hole over here, what we're really talking
This
about is
testimony proves that there was
down
a
into
second
the- It goes
shooter.
in at this front corner and then it's out. And when you drew that line for us about the trajectory of the bullet actually just went in, according to you, just went in very briefly and then out the nasal cavity into the left cheek, right?
very briefly, sure. Takes no time at all.
Well,
Did you
very
examine the
briefly into
grassy
brain,
knoll,
just a
sir?
little part of it then, right?
Yes, through the frontal lobe,
Okay, the right frontal lobe.
yes.
And with regard to your report, everything else is correct, isn't it?
I believe so.
All right, nothing further.
Direct.
Dolly picked it up. Back into
Even
the,
though you couldn't
back
see,
into the,
given the consistency of the brain, even though you couldn't see a track in terms of this particular wound, exhibit number 653, is this the entrance wound?
Yes,
And the bullet was traveling in this direction?
yes.
And if it's traveling in this direction, what would it hit?
It's going to injure the right frontal lobe.
And what is this right here? Is this the cranium?
But
Is that
he
what they
has
call it?
That is
no-
the right frontal bone.
he has no knowledge
cranium.
of whether or not that
And
would
then
actually
the bullet traveled in this
cause
direction and it came out of the cavity there,
incapacitation.
correct?
Yes.
I don't have anything else, thank you.
Looks like we have one juror question. Are there any others?
Ooh. What's the jury got going on?
Counsel, please approach.
Going down, down, down like a burning ring of fire.
Would you agree?
Oh, juror question.
The juror has a question for you. Would you agree?
What is that? Is that the video doing that?
Yeah.
A juror has a question for you. Would you agree that 100% of the people you have seen with frontal lobe trauma are deceased at the time of your examination?
That you see,
Well, yeah, because he works in a morgue. You would hope they are dead when he sees them.
It's true.
Oh, I mean, what is the defense going to ask that famous question? Are you sure he was dead? Yes, I had his brain in a jar on my
What was the jury question?
That was the jury question. Were you 100%? Are the 100% of the cases you have seen with these kind of injuries are they dead? Well, yeah.
All right,
He's a
yeah.
coroner. It's a forensic medical examiner.
Let's hear some follow up on that. Oh my God. This is the quality of the jury, people, though. This is the quality of the jury.
They kind of misunderstood what he did for a living, I think. He sees dead people. Oh, that's so funny.
That have this injury are deceased. Getting you back to this particular case, does that change your opinion about the bullet, its trajectory, blood that was there, was not there? Does that change any of your opinions?
No.
Does that change your opinion as to whether or not this gunshot wound, when it occurred, immediately incapacitated Mr.
That should
Alexander?
be on the scope.
Change that opinion?
If he was alive at the time.
And did it, if he was alive? If he was alive, Mr. Alexander?
He was already dead by the time I saw him.
Change that opinion?
If he was alive at the time.
And did it, if he was alive? If he was alive, it incapacitated him immediately, correct?
Yes.
If he was dead, that would account for the life.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with any of the research that's been done with regard to projectiles in the brain, right?
I have to rely on the cases I've seen. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the jury? All right. One more question. Counsel, please approach.
Oh, this better be a good one.
One additional question. Your report stated there was no damage to the durameter membrane. Can you explain how the brain can be damaged?
Did it cut out?
No?
It's weird.
The only thing I can say is that that's a typographical error.
That's
part
it?
of
That's
our
your
usual protocol
response?
with report. So
It was a typo?
clearly the durameter had to have been perforated. So that would be a typographical error in my report.
All right. Any other
Or is
questions?
it you
Protocol
changing
with
your
report.
opinion, sir?
So clearly the durameter had to have been perforated. So that would be a typographical error in my report.
All right. Any other questions from the jury? Follow up, Mr. Martinez.
With regard to that issue of the perforation of that particular part of the anatomy, so as you look at it, and your recollection based on what you saw, was there that perforation?
Yes, there would have to have been. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
There would have to have been. Yes.
When you say there would have to have been, why is that?
Because of the location of the tracks and the fact that the dura sits right on where that bone would have been fractured and blown apart. So it would have had to have perforated the dura in that location.
I don't have any other questions.
Ms. Wilmot.
Dr. Horn, you're aware that this is a capital case, right?
Yes.
You know how serious it is.
Objection, relevance.
Do you understand
Get it
that
out
this
there,
is a
though.
serious case?
Yes.
Objection, relevance.
Hug you too?
You would have reviewed your report prior to coming to testify, right?
Yes.
And you would have reviewed your report probably long before that again, also, right?
Yes, before testimony.
And you were interviewed in this case by defense counsel, weren't you?
Yes.
And wouldn't you have reviewed your report prior to being interviewed by defense counsel?
Usually, yes.
And in all those times that you were reviewing your reports, you never found any error with regard to the durameter, did you?
I did not note that until just now.
Okay, and in fact, did I not just ask you 5 minutes ago if the rest of your report was correct, right?
To the best of my knowledge, it was, yes.
And you answered yes.
Yes.
But in fact, now you're telling us in order to fit with the idea that this bullet had to have passed through the brain, and you're sure that the mistake isn't the fact that the bullet just didn't go through the brain?
It had to have injured the brain, yes.
So then you're just wrong in your report and it's incorrect.
It's a typographical error, yes.
Nothing further.
All right, any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Horn. You may step down. State may call its next witness.
State calls Jill Hayes.
I look toasted, Bobby says. Well, I might be distracted because I was just trying to see if there's anyone else going live that we could redirect to. Not that it's time. I was just looking for that.
No, we have 45 minutes left at least.
Yeah, I was just seeing if anyone was. I thought Salvador was streaming earlier, but I guess it's not for 3 hours.
Last name for me.
Hayes, Hayes.
To give will be the truth. Raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Who's Jill Hayes?
I don't know. Doctor. She's a doctor, and I think she was the receptionist in L.A. Law, if you remember that show.
No, but okay.
It's a law show from the 90s.
I mean, I know the show. I never watched it, but I don't
Yeah.
remember the receptionist in the show.
Please walk right around and have a seat.
Oh, no. No, I was talking about the court reporter, not this woman.
Oh, okay. That woman's got a sneaky waist from the waist up. It's
Yeah.
like when she's on a dating site, you're like, I want a full length photo.
Your name, please?
My name
That's one
is
of the-
Jill
you need to take
Hayes.
a picture
And
from
what do
the
you do
top.
for a living?
I am a forensic neuropsychologist.
And where do you work?
I work,
Okay, so this is a forensic neuropsychiatrist that is here to
Psychologist.
rebut the other neuropsychiatrist for the defense.
Yes. All right.
here in Arizona as well as in Louisiana.
When you say that you work here in Arizona as well as Louisiana, are you licensed in the state of Arizona?
I am.
Are you licensed in the state of Louisiana?
I am.
Where do you live?
I
What state?
live in Louisiana.
And in terms of your education, when did you receive your bachelor's degree?
I'm sorry.
When did you receive your bachelor's degree?
In 1990,
From where?
from Armstrong State College in Savannah, Georgia.
And what was the area of study?
It was in psychology.
And after you graduated, did you continue on with your studies or did you go do something else?
No, I kept going
And did you go to the same school or go somewhere else?
somewhere else.
Where did you go?
I went to Augusta State College in Augusta, Georgia.
And at Augusta State College, what degree did you receive?
She's
I
like
received a
45
master's
right here.
degree in applied psychology.
And what year was that?
That was in 1992.
After that, did you continue your studies?
I took a year off.
And during that year, did you work in the area of psychology or not?
I did.
What did you do?
I was a psychometrist for a neuropsychologist, which
Whoop.
means I did testing.
And then after that, what school did you go to?
I went to Louisiana State University.
So what year would that have been?
I started in 1993.
And when did you graduate?
I graduated from LSU in 1998.
And when you graduated in 98, that would mean you had your doctorate, correct?
Correct.
Once having your doctorate, can you practice or do you have to wait to be licensed?
At that point in time, you had to do another year before you could actually sit for the licensing exam.
And that year of study that you had, where did you accomplish that?
I did that at LSU Health Sciences Center, the School of Medicine in New Orleans.
And what did you do there in terms of your training?
I was on faculty at LSU and also concurrently did a fellowship in forensic psychology and neuropsychology.
When you say you were faculty at LSU, what does that mean? What did you do?
I was hired as an assistant professor, and I just want to make sure, I think I said something incorrectly. You could take the licensing exam during the year, but you had to take the oral exam at the end of the year. So I didn't want to be confusing. But I was an assistant professor, which meant that I had to wear a number of different hats, which would include teaching, research, seeing patients, doing administrative work.
And so when were you licensed?
I was licensed in 1999
And after being licensed, where did you begin to work?
at the same place I stayed at LSU School of Medicine.
What did you do there?
I continued as an assistant professor until I was promoted later.
think
Then
we
I was
are
an
at
associate professor
1.25, aren't we?
and,
Nick, at 1.25?
and then continued on. And
I'm sorry, I didn't hear somebody coughed. I didn't hear what you said.
I continued on after I was promoted to an associate professor. I was with LSU for about 8 years.
And while you were with LSU for about 8 years, what were you doing? I know you said you were a professor, assistant professor, but what were your duties?
Again, you did a number of different things. You had to do teaching, you had to do research, you had to see patients, administrative work. And so I did a number of different things.
And after that, where did you begin working after those 8 years?
After those 8 years, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and the med school, part of the med school was underwater.
Eating it up.
And so I actually came out here and I started teaching at ASU and I started working with a forensic psychiatrist, Stephen Pitt. And so I've been doing work with him since out here and then back in New Orleans, a private practice there as well.
And your practice, what does it consist of? Is it seeing patients or is it something else? Explain to me what your practice is.
My practice now is mostly forensic psychology or neuropsychology, doing evaluations of folks. I still on occasion see people that I had seen prior to Hurricane Katrina. When I was at the med school,
I forgot about Katrina.
I worked at the HIV clinic, and so I still see some of those folks from time to time. And I also see police officers who are having difficulties as well.
And as part of your work, does that entail testifying in proceedings such as this?
It does.
And how often have you done that?
Probably around 75 times I've testified.
And your current caseload, in terms of plaintiff and defendant, what's the split?
My current caseload,
Of cases where you testify, what's the split in terms of prosecution and defense?
we keep, in my field, you keep 4 years of your testimony according to the federal rules of evidence. And so today I will be 50-50, so 50% prosecution, 50% defense.
Are you familiar with a test called the TSI?
I am.
What is, first of all, what does that acronym stand for?
It stands for the Trauma Symptom Inventory.
And what is that test used for?
It's it's used to measure symptoms of depression, anxiety, different difficulties that a person may have as a result of a trauma.
And does that require there to be a trauma for that test to be given in the realm of a forensic evaluation? Where does that come in?
I would probably give it in the realm of trauma, just because that's its intended purpose.
Is that the first thing that you would do when somebody walks in, or do you have to have sort of an indication that there was some trauma that was involved?
I would think you would have to have an indication that there was some trauma. I mean, each person's different, so you have to figure out why they're coming to see you and then proceed accordingly.
So let's say that in this case, the presentation of the trauma was that the individual took a test, and I'll show it to you. Are you familiar with what the PDS is?
I am.
What is it?
It's the post-traumatic stress diagnostic scale. It's another paper and pencil test where a person fills out basically yes or no to various symptoms that they could have, or rates them on a scale between, say, 0 and 3 as to how bad something is, the particular item in question.
And with regard to this particular test, are you familiar with the PDS test in this case?
No.
In terms of this particular case, have you reviewed any of the PDS tests that were given?
No.
Let's say, are you familiar with question 14 though?
Question 14?
Yes, of the test that is administered of the PDS.
No.
Is there a question that deals with what trauma is involved?
I believe so.
And with regard to that question that deals with the trauma, what if there's a situation, for example, if the trauma or the traumatic event that is spoken of turns out to be untruthful or a lie?
That would give you concern, of course.
What does that do to the validity of the...
Are they going to get into the head wound issue, or is this just entirely about Jodi's mental health issues?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll find out. But this is going very differently than I thought. I thought they were going to go into like, can you get shot in the head and still function kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe they'll get there at some point.
PDS test, the results.
If the reason that the person was given the test is a lie, then it calls into question everything else that the person had indicated on the test.
Would you blindly, with regard to a test, if you knew the person had lied on the PDS, would you continue on and say, well, no, they may have lied about this trauma, but I'm still going to consider this to be valid because there could have been some other trauma that they were referring to. Is that how this test is done?
Can you rephrase the question?
Let's say that the trauma or the incident involving the trauma is a lie, and then the person answers the PDS based on that lie. Every one of the symptoms that they exhibit or that they acknowledge is based on a lie. Let's assume that. If that's the case, how valid could that test be if the event that supposedly triggers this is a lie?
If what you're telling me is that the event was a lie and that every answer was a lie, then of course the test would be invalid.
Well, no, Could it be a situation that that somehow, as a psychologist, you could divine that or see that if the answer was a lie, what confidence do you then have that whatever answers are then made after that, what confidence do you have that they're the truth if you have an event that's a lie to start with?
Oh my
I
God,
would be very
that's the
concerned
worst
because if
question
you
ever.
know 100% for sure that something is a lie, then how do you know that what else is being told to you or what's being answered is the truth?
And so in that circumstance, would you then say, well, if we have a lie to start with, would you then use that sort of as a starting point, even though you know that the event that's listed is a lie? Or would you do something else?
So I'm just realizing this is day 54.
Yeah.
This prosecutor handled the entire case on his own. He had no assistant, no second chair. He withheld stuff from his lead detective because he didn't want to tip off anybody as to what some of his strategy was.
Yeah.
And although he's angry and seems condescending at times, and his questions are a little confusing, he's doing a fairly good job at prosecuting this. Now, compare that with the Karen Reed prosecutor, who everyone's criticizing because he's going at it alone, and that's weird.
Yeah.
And, no, it can be done.
But talking about people who can function with only half a brain, let's talk about the prosecutor in the Karen Reed case. I cannot for the life of me understand, with the knowledge of the FBI, the guys the FBI hired to do the reconstruction, with that knowledge that there is not, in order for Karen's car to hit John and fling him 30 feet, you have to defy the laws of physics. And you still choose to prosecute.
Yep.
And it's a hung jury.
Well, it's not hung right now. They're still deliberating. They'll be back on.
They are deliberating now, but because that is one of the most ultimate exculpatory evidence. That car cannot, according to the laws of physics, have caused the injuries on John.
Matt's asked, how much does Rumble take? Here's the thing with Rumble. I don't know because I've never gotten a payment from them, because you have to earn over a certain amount per month before they will pay out to you. And I've never earned that amount per month, so I've never gotten paid. I don't know.
I think you have to earn a certain amount, and then it accumulates until you reach that month, and then you can get a payment of all the things. But I don't know what their cut is.
It's never earned enough to actually pay out to me.
I've been on Rumble for about a year, maybe a little over a year. I don't think the combined everything is up to what I need in 1 month.
My combined Rumble, I'm looking at it right now. My combined Rumble since April of 2023, so over a year ago, $94.25. It's not enough for them to pay me out, though.
Let's see here.
That's for the last 14 months.
Let's see here. $43.86.
Ooh, all right.
I have one active monthly sub. I assume that's you.
So they just have your money on hold. That's probably me because I am actively sub to you. Yeah, it's just sitting here. I can see it, but they say, so Rumble says that once you're eligible to get a payment out, there's a new window that pops up that says cash out or something like that. That window has never popped up for me. So, no, the threshold is more than $94. I want to say it's $100 or something.
But they have this new thing now on Rumble where you can read ad campaigns, where you read it and then they will calculate, and it's like 3 cents per view or something like that. But I still haven't found an ad campaign I want to read to my viewers on Rumble. I don't want to read a Rumble ad for the YouTube audience.
Oh, I would if they pay right. And it's
if but you only get paid for the things on Rumble, not on the views on YouTube.
Sure.
So that, I mean, nah. Okay, $50. Ah, so I'm $5 from the payout on Rumble.
Minimum payout threshold of $50. Well, then how come I'm not getting paid?
I have no idea.
To look into this.
Yeah, look into it.
Listed or traumatic event that we're talking about. If you have that traumatic event and you know that it's a lie in terms of the validity of the result of this test, is that something that you are going to be confident in, or that as a psychologist you're going to be confident in?
I certainly would not be confident in the results if I knew that the premise was a lie.
So would you then continue to administer other tests, for example, the Malone, even though this PDF gave you this, or you know that there's a lie on it? Would you continue on with the premise that, well, that may have been on the PDS? Would you then continue and just ignore it when you administer the MCMI?
Objection, Judge, let me post.
Yes.
Now, would you have any confidence then just continue ignoring the results, the fact that there had been a lie in this test, and then continue administering another test?
It would depend on the situation.
The situation is, as I just described it, they lied.
But what I'm saying is it would depend on the situation as far as, is this a one?
The situation is, as I just described it, they lied.
But what I'm saying is it would depend on the situation as far as, is this a one-time event that you have with this person and that's the only time that you're ever going to be able to interview that person? Or is this going to be an ongoing evaluation? And so I think it would be dependent on that.
Are you talking about whether or not this is an ongoing evaluation, or are you talking about whether the person has lied on other?
No, I'm saying sometimes when you are a forensic psychologist, you only have one bite at the apple. And so if I only have one bite, I would probably continue. If I had more bites, then I probably would not continue.
And if you only have one bite of the apple, why would you continue? And how is it that you would deal with the validity of a test like this? And would you, instead of being, as you said, honest, would you attempt to rescore this 3 times?
Objection, Judge. Let me post.
Yes.
And the sidebar. I don't think Angry Elf is happy with her answers.
No, that's what I said. He's like trying to impeach his own witness.
Yeah.
I am.
Are you familiar with the term called a floating profile? Are you familiar with that?
I am.
What is a floating profile?
Floating profile refers to a profile on the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, whereby of the 10 clinical scales, 8 are in the elevated range, which would be above what's called a T-score of around 65 to 70.
And with regard to that particular profile, are you familiar with who coined it or who came up with it?
I am.
Who was that?
It was a person named Strong in
So was it,
1957.
are you sure it was somebody by the last name of Gatchel?
I am.
And so it was Strong, okay. And what else do you know about this?
What do you mean?
In other words, he came up with it, and what did it mean when he came up with it?
Basically, it meant when a person had this type of elevated profile kind of across the board, that a person is definitely experiencing arousal, the person's overwhelmed. And so it also was applied to folks with borderline personality disorder.
Exhibit 631, this is an MMPI profile. Are you familiar with, have you seen that before?
I believe so.
And when we were talking about these floating profiles, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
And so what is, because we're talking floating, what is floating about this profile? In other words, why is this a floating profile?
Can you?
Well, there's a, something
Can I
like,
point?
do you see that? Now you can hit the pencil thing.
Pencil? Okay.
Yeah, and then mark, or the arrow, whichever one you want.
I'll try this now. Those particular scales are all above this line, which is the 65 line, which I was saying is the point at which one would consider not to be elevated. So these scales that I tried really inartfully to circle are all above that. And so that's what is floating about it, is that they're all elevated.
And with regard to this floating profile, in terms of whether or not it can have any indications or any applicability to borderline personality disorder, is that an outdated concept that has gone by the wayside, or what's going on with that?
It's not something that's discussed frequently, because it is a pretty antiquated term, but it's still available, it's still researched, and it's still used.
Would you agree? We've had an individual here who testified that, well, this has been changed and it's no longer valid, and that Dr. Gatchel has in fact said that this floating profile, the concept is no longer valid as it applies to borderline personality disorder. Is that what your research has indicated?
With all due respect, I would disagree.
Why?
Because Dr. Gatchel did some research in 2006. Dr. Gatchel is a psychologist who works at University of Texas Arlington with spinal disorder patients and people who have other sorts of I guess, bodily injuries. And he did not say that the floating profile was not valid. He then changed the name for his purpose and said, I'm going to call this now the disability profile, not valid. He then changed the name for his purpose and said, I'm going to call this now the disability profile, final disorder patients. It was still indicating folks that had borderline personality, and then did research on that. And what his research showed was that in his, yes, I am.
Let me find.
If I understand correctly, so this person who the defense claims said that is no longer valid. No, he tuned it into his actual area. The borderline personality is still ongoing. He just made a new scale that was surrounding the disability of spinal cord injuries.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So but it's not the way she phrased it. She phrased it like, he just sort of changed the name.
Mm.
Has Nurmi just stopped grooming himself at this point? Yeah, he's a mess.
626. If you just tap the arrow up there, I think it, tap it. There you go.
Tap it. Tap it.
With regard to this trauma symptom inventory test, what is it that this test does, or what is it measuring?
This test is intended to measure symptoms that may result from trauma or from some sort of experience that a person has that they experience to be causing them intense helplessness, horror, and other things like that.
This TSI, there was a TSI
causing them intense helplessness, horror.
It's kind of
and
annoying.
Other things like that.
This TSI, there was a TSI 1 and a TSI 2, correct?
That's right.
The TSI 1, when did the TSI 2 come into effect?
The TSI 2 was published in February of 2011.
And the TSI 1 that was testified to was that if you don't use the TSI 2 the next day after it comes out, that somehow you're incompetent. Do you agree with that?
Overall, do you answer the question?
Ma'am? I think, no, absolutely not. That's not true.
Was there a problem, and as you see it in this case, that there was a lapse of time between the TSI, when after the TSI 2 came into effect, that the TSI 1 was still being used? There's a period there. Do you see a problem with the TSI being administered on the date it was administered, even though the TSI 2 was available?
No.
Why is that?
Well, because after a new test gets released, many people would like to make sure that the new test is just as good as the old test. And so they wait for additional research to be done to ensure that the new test actually works and does what it's supposed to and is actually better. And so many psychologists will wait and just make sure that the new one that came out is just as good.
And so do you see any, by problem, I mean any psychological deficiency in waiting in this particular case and still using the TSI 1 even though the TSI 2 was available?
No, and in fact, the peer-reviewed literature does not suggest that either.
So in other words, you're saying those that do this type of research doesn't suggest that either.
Objection leading.
What I'm saying is that there has been, like, for example, an article published in the Clinical Neuropsychologist in 2010 that's saying, when should we use these new tests? And that there is no standard for when one should switch from one test to another, and it depends on the judgment of the clinician. And if the clinician has a good reason for why he or she doesn't want to switch to the new one yet, well, then that must be respected.
This test includes some summary scales, correct?
It can.
And when you say that it can, are you familiar with this test if it's scored not by computer but by hand?
I am. That's actually the one that I was, I guess, raised on.
And with regard to scoring it by hand, is there a requirement anywhere by the people that have this test or the patent on this test or anywhere in the literature that requires or indicates that the best course to take is to have these summary scales after you do this test and you score it?
No.
And what are you relying on to say that?
I'm relying on two things. One is the fact that when you have the hand scoring, well, I guess three things. One is when I was trained at the National Crime Victims Research and Treatment Center in Charleston, South Carolina, we didn't do the summary scales there that I can recall. It's been a few years, but I don't recall them. We used the hand scoring and we didn't have computer scoring. And on the hand scoring profile form, there actually is no spot for you to be able to write the summary scores or calculate it. The third thing would be that I contacted the test publisher and just asked, and they said that the sustained.
Ma'am, is this as part of an expert that you are? When you reach an opinion, do you sometimes go out and read articles?
Absolutely.
And as part of this research as an expert, do you also talk to the people, for example, that create this test?
In some cases I would. When you
How about in this one?
In this one I did.
And is that part of, does that form your opinion in this particular case as to whether or not the summary scales are required or in your view have to always be in this test?
Yes.
And what is it that you learned after speaking with them? Why don't you tell us what you learned rather than saying he or she said, what did you learn about the requirement that there be this summary attached to these scales?
I guess I didn't learn anything new. I learned that it wasn't a requirement. I just wanted to make 100% sure.
Okay, so you actually confirmed what you already knew, right?
Exactly.
And who is it that you spoke to, the organization?
A representative from the organization.
Objection Foundation, which organization?
It's the same.
Go ahead, tell me, who did you contact? What organization?
And I had phone and electronic correspondence with a person named Terry Lyons.
Okay.
Who's Terry now? Does Terry need to be called?
Do you remember the?
Yes, ma'am. Psychological Assessment Resources, and the acronym is PAR. Thank you.
And what we're really talking about with regard to the summary scales are these things right here, right?
Yes.
Do
And
it,
those
Terry.
scales, the other scales that are here in the middle, are these, what are these then?
Those are just the clinical scales.
And do you need to have this, is it absolutely imperative that you have these summary scales here in order to know what these other scales, the ones that were actually scored, mean?
Objection has to be answered.
Overruled.
Yeah.
No.
And can some?
Could you
when we
imagine
practice
the
and
Google
based on what you know in the
searches
literature,
if we
you just
had
go,
today's
yes, you go and
technology?
look at those and then make an assessment or make a
Jodi
determination as
trial.
to what's going on.
Certainly. I mean, if you had like 25 scales or something like that, maybe it would be nice to have a summary scale, but to have 3 summary scales for only 10 scales, you can just look at the 10.
You are familiar with the MMPI, correct?
Yes.
And this is exhibit number 631. What is the MMPI?
The MMPI is probably the most commonly used test of psychopathology and personality that is given by psychologists.
And is this of any use in making a determination as to whether or not an individual may be diagnosed with borderline personality disorder?
It's helpful, but it's not the end all be all. You've got other pieces of the puzzle.
When you say that there are other pieces of the puzzle, what are you talking about?
What I mean is that no competent psychologist that I know would base his or her opinion solely on a test. You want to use the test to hopefully validate or confirm other pieces of data that you would receive, like a forensic interview, collateral information from other people, records that you have, observations of the person that you see. And what you want is for all of the data to point into the same direction, and then you can be really sure that what you are saying is accurate.
And you're talking in the perfect world. Is it a situation that every case that comes through a psychologist's door fits all the criteria all the time, and there's all this corroborative data out there, or is there a situation where the psychologist has to make a decision?
I wish it was. I mean, that would make our jobs a lot easier, but people are all different and we're not always consistent. And so, no.
And is this just, as they say, part of the whole in making an assessment in reaching a diagnosis?
Yes. I mean, a diagnosis is not going to rise and fall with the results of a test.
And if you, for example, just looked at the MMPI, the TSI, and the PDS, if you just looked at those 3 tests as well as the MCMI, would you be able to then say, you know, I believe that this person has PTSD or has borderline personality disorder? Can you do that?
No, you can. In fact, you're cautioned against that.
What is required even if you have all of these tests that are administered?
What's required is that you actually do an evaluation. And as part of the evaluation, it would be helpful to do an interview. It really depends on the situation. I mean, you're using these tests to develop hypotheses about someone, to develop ideas about what may or may not be wrong with them that you either then need to confirm or deny through other sources of information.
In terms of the MMPI too, if you're going to administer this test, is it a situation where you just sit there and you begin to talk to the individual without any more and just give them this test, or is there any other kind of work that needs to be done before you actually administer the test?
Objection, maybe objection. Yes.
And approach.
Yeah, you told me that there was a lot of sidebars in today's trial.
Yeah.
A lot of sidebars.
Have that filled out? So you just throw that in front of the person that you're going to have that filled out? Is that how it's done by the psychologist, the elite psychologist?
No.
Well, is it something that you then sit and you say to them, can you read, for example, extended score report or read something? And then you say, okay, you can go ahead and fill it out. Is that how it's done?
Can you ask me that question again?
For example, would it be a situation where if you're going to administer this, that is there a determination that has to be made as to some level of confidence the person is going to take it in terms of reading ability before you administer it?
Absolutely.
And why is that? Why not just, assume? That's all right. You've talked to them. You've sort of seen them reading it. Shouldn't that be enough?
No, it's
Why not?
Especially in cases like this, you have to ensure that the person who is reading the test actually understands it. And one can ensure that through giving that person a reading test.
And what's that reading test called?
Well, there's different ones. The one that was used in this case was called the Wide Range Achievement Test, the 4th edition. And
is there an acronym for that one?
RAT.
Go ahead.
Or RAT 4 in this case, because it's the 4th edition. And it's a simple and easy to give test. And the reason that it's important is that, I mean, even I've seen folks who have graduated from college who still read at a 3rd grade level. You need to make sure that the person understands what they're reading. Otherwise, the data that you're going to be getting is going to be bad. It's just common sense.
Would you agree there was an individual who testified before you? Would you agree that in this case, and his opinion was that, well, Dr. Janine DeMarte, the only reason was doing that was get more money from the prosecution. Would you agree that with that statement as it applies in this case?
With all due respect, I wouldn't, because to ensure that the reading level was adequate would probably take 5 minutes.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Cross-examination.
No, Jim, this is the prosecution's witness.
Good, I guess, evening, Dr. Hayes. Good evening.
Good evening.
What you were just talking about with
process
regards
anything.
to making sure the person is able to read before they take the MMPI.
Mhm.
You said it takes about 5 minutes?
Yes.
And in order to make sure that they can read, can't you, you can also just give them something to read, can't you?
You wouldn't, here's the problem. If you just give them something to read, you're not going to have any normed-based information on which to draw your opinion. When Dr. DeMarte gave
Tell me you can't give them a Dr. Seuss book
was an
and
actual
then
grade score.
determine whether or not they read it
Here.
accurately?
Yeah.
That's stupid. You can't
Sorry,
give them just a book.
Fell. And in this case, she was at the 12th grade level for reading. The MMPI, depending on which questions you're reading or which author you're believing, is going to be written at the 6th to 8th grade reading level.
Let me stop you there.
Sustained.
What's non-responsive?
All right, sustained.
If before Dr. DeMarte gives this RAT test, she has read through thousands of pages of a diary that Ms. Arias wrote herself, and she finds that she's able to read through these diaries and they
Why do
make
we
perfect
not
sense
have
and
this
they're not,
entire
the
diary?
spelling is correct and they're following in order so that they're making sense to read. And if she's reviewed that, and then she's also reviewed text messages that go back and forth between a conversation with Ms. Arias and other people, so she's able to understand, she's able to see that there's a conversation going back and forth, that Ms. Arias is clearly able to follow this conversation. And if she has access to another doctor's report that tells her that Ms. Arias has an IQ score of 112, if she has all of that information prior to giving the MMPI, isn't that enough to say that she can read at a 5th grade level and conduct the MMPI?
Well, it's more than 5th,
Okay.
for one. It's probably 6th to 8th, and some say even some questions are going to be higher than that.
Okay,
But
isn't it enough then to say that she can read at a 6th to 8th grade level?
no, and I'd like to explain why. Because I can tell you, if Dr. DeMarte would have sat up here and had not done that, then someone would have criticized her for not doing that. And so it really is best practice for her just to take the 5 minutes and do it. What does it hurt?
So you're saying that you can conduct a complete RAT test in 5 minutes?
No, I'm saying that you can conduct the reading recognition, and that way you can get a grade level on where that person falls in terms of his or her reading recognition.
Okay, but she conducted the entire RAT test, didn't she?
I don't think she did. I think she just did reading recognition. I'll check.
Okay.
No, just reading recognition.
Okay, and so despite knowing that Ms. Arias had 112 IQ, you still think she had to make sure she could read?
Absolutely, because if she didn't, she would have been crucified.
Oh, okay, so basically the only purpose for doing it then is to make sure that she's not cross-examined for why she didn't do it. Is that what you mean?
That, and to make 100% sure that there is no problem with her reading. It's always a possibility. I would have done it.
Okay. You were talking about the MMPI. I believe you said that it was helpful to diagnose borderline.
Yes.
Is that right? But it's not actually a test that is supposed to be used to diagnose personality disorders, right?
No test should be used to diagnose something. Again, it's like what Mr. Martinez was
Well, let me
saying.
stop you there, because the thing is when I'm talking about the MMPI, using it, it's an instrument to talk about personality characteristics, right?
Personality characteristics as well as psychopathology.
Okay, and it's something that
This
we're
is when they
talking about
started
that
not
is
diagnosing
based on a person's
people.
personality that we expect to remain static, right?
Yes and no. There's going to be straight, what's called state characteristics as well as trait characteristics, because a person's situation that they're in may affect some of the way that they answer some of those questions. For example, if
Dr.
you...
Case, or objection, non-responsive. Okay, the MMPI, that when that was created, that was normed against a general population, right?
It was. Well,
Okay.
actually, the first MMPI was normed against people that were in Minnesota.
I'm sorry, the MMPI too. Yes, the one that we're talking about. So it's normed against people who don't have psychological.
I didn't know there was a difference.
I didn't either. Let's see. So only people in Minnesota were the basis for the MM or the whatever it is, LSPI. Or,
Yeah, okay.
Right?
That don't have...
Psychological disorders.
It was based on what was considered to be a normal population, but I would probably use normal in air quotes.
Okay, so when we talk about normal, in other words, it's normed against people
Minnesota, after all.
that they're not necessarily known to have psychological disorders.
No
right?
identifiable that I'm aware of. So,
Okay, all right, and then the MCMI, are you familiar with that test?
I am.
And that test is actually normed against people who are known to have psychological disorders, right?
That's correct.
And the MCMI, that test is specifically designed, maybe not to give us a complete diagnosis on just that one test, but it is designed to tell us more about specifically personality disorders, isn't it?
No.
It doesn't tell us anything about personality
No,
disorders?
you said to give us more. I mean, actually more research has been done on personality disorders with regard to the MMPI than the MCMI. The MCMI is another great test, but so is the MMPI.
MCMI.
I use them both. They're both fine.
Okay, but when we're talking about personality disorders, we're talking about the MCMI being specifically normed against people who are known to have personality disorders, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so if you have a hypothesis about a personality disorder, wouldn't you want to use the test that is normed against personality disorders?
If I could, I would give both. In most situations, though, if given the choice of just being able to do one or the other, I would probably choose the MMPI because it's had probably 10 times as much research done on it as the MCMI.
Okay, you would use the MMPI to help diagnose personality disorders?
No, I'm saying if I only could give one, because both of them are pretty long, then I would probably choose the MMPI because I think it's better researched and it's going to give you more information.
Well, I mean, you're not limited. Let's assume that
I'm sorry?
you're not limited to just giving one. So if you're going to talk about personality disorders, don't you agree that the MCMI is the test that talks about personality disorders, that tells us more about personality disorders?
I think that the MCMI is great for helping determine whether a person has characteristics that are similar to people with personality disorders, but the MMPI has the same it's research-based as well, and there's research on the MMPI related to what types of scales would be elevated if a person had a certain sort of personality disorder.
So the MCMI is what you're saying is that the MCMI is a great test to determine to use with personality disorders.
I think they both are very good.
Okay. With regard to the TSI, with regard to the TSI, using the TSI-1 versus the TSI-2, you've never used the TSI-2, is that right?
No, I haven't.
And in fact, the last time you gave the TSI was in 2010, is that right?
I believe so.
So it's not something that you are doing very recently at all, right?
I'm sorry?
It's not something you are giving very recently?
No, not in the past couple of years.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, did you say something? Okay.
No.
Ultimately, you'd agree that it's best to use updated tests, right?
One would not want to use obsolete tests, but one would also want to make sure that the test that you're going to be using is research-based and actually does what it's supposed to do.
And when a new test is coming out, like if we're talking about the TSI, when a new test is coming out, people who are in that specific area, so the TSI that deals with trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And so people who are dealing with trauma as a specialty, they are going to know that this TSI is coming out, right?
Oh, sure, generally.
And in fact, before the TSI-2 comes out, there is trainings on it, and there's obviously research done before it's approved to be released, right?
Generally, the research is going to be done by the authors of the test who actually stand to gain from people buying the test. And so that is why many psychologists wait until independent researchers have actually done their studies, because if you're making a decision to buy a new test based upon the research that was done by someone who stands to gain as a result of selling the test, that's why we want to wait in many cases.
So waiting 7 months is acceptable to you?
Yes, and it's also, according to the peer-reviewed literature, there is no set cutoff date.
Well, and that's because in the peer-reviewed literature, they want to make sure, they want to give the doctor latitude to determine a good reason why they might want to wait to use an updated test, right?
Your question, I don't understand. Can you rephrase?
Sure. The literature that you're referring to.
Max Murrah is our guest tonight, which is going to be quite interesting because he is both very intelligent, seems obtuse at times, and then also very scary. So if you guys don't know Max Murrah, he's a Japanese man, but I believe he's American descent, but he is Japanese living in Japan. He's got a bunch of awesome stories, and so he'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and now with my new setup, I just need another one more camera, and I might be able to join one of them in the future. Or if we have an extra day when I get up there, we could build.
I'm down with that. I like that. Yeah. Definitely going to do a Lego stream with Nicholas, either before or while he's in the US. That would be great. It'd be very cool.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
And just in general, when we talk about using outdated versus updated tests, one of the things that doctors in your area, psychologists, would want to have is latitude to decide to use this updated test. That's what the literature is telling you.
Okay, first off, I wouldn't say that it was outdated. I would say that there was an updated test. I would agree with you there. Okay. But I absolutely agree with you that you need latitude, because the psychologist who's making the choices of what test he or she is going to use is going to base what test he or she is going to use, hopefully, on sound methodology and reasoning.
So based on that, then, you would want to have a good reason, right? The psychologist would want to have a good reason to wait to use an updated test.
I would think so.
And for you, a good reason would be to make sure that it's being researched and it's being used by other people first to make sure that it's a good test.
You definitely would want to wait for that. The other possibility would be that there's so much a wealth of research on the old one, especially in specific populations. So say I gave a test to the court reporter, and then that would be a specific test to court reporters. So you want to find out about anxiety in let's use the spinal disorders group again. That's a very specific group. And so a lot of times when these tests come out, it's just for a generalized population. But if I want to look specifically at court reporters and spinal disorders group, that research may not have been conducted yet. And so I would want to wait and make sure that a good database of researches is there before I switch, because if I actually have to test the court reporter, I want to make sure that the test is going to work.
Okay, so another reason to wait would be to make sure that the test works.
Absolutely.
Okay, but if you were told that the reason that the person gave the outdated test or didn't give the updated test is simply because she just didn't own it, not having anything to do with waiting to make sure it's tested or waiting to make sure it's a good test, just simply because she didn't have it, you'd consider that not a good reason, right?
I actually consider that to be one of the reasons. And it's a little crass to say, but a lot of these tests are kind of expensive. And so to switch from one to the other, it can be costly.
So based on what you're telling us, it's okay to not use an updated test just because it costs too much.
No, I'm saying there's many different reasons. You have to look at what the person's reasoning is, whether
Well,
it's,
but isn't
is
that
it
what you just-
research-based, is it due to cost, is it due to the fact that there are subpopulations that you want to make sure that the test works with. And so,
So one of those reasons that you're saying is it's okay to wait to use an updated test because it costs too much. That's one of the reasons, right?
in some cases, that is some reasoning, because
Okay,
I
did you
mean,
know
some
how
of these
much
are
the TS
over $1,500. And
Did
so
you know
it
how much
could
the
be-
TSI2 cost?
I think the TSI2 is probably around 200 something.
$200?
I think so.
so
I mean,
that's a
don't
good
quote
enough-
me because I haven't priced it.
Okay, but if it's about $200, that's a good enough reason for somebody to wait 7 months to give it.
I didn't say that. I said that a person may want to wait for a number of reasons. One would be the research base. Two would be subpopulations.
No,
three
I
would
heard
be
your
cost.
reason. What I'm saying is if you're told that this person said, I waited because my employer didn't buy it yet for me. And so her employer doesn't spend $200 to get the updated test. Do you agree that that's a good reason to wait?
Does this make the defense sound
We're talking about
scared of this
7
test?
months. And so that is, again, you're only talking about one data point. What you're doing is you're looking at, imagine the Titanic. You are looking at one chair on the Titanic and you're saying that.
Responsive. Sustained. Do you agree or do you not agree that waiting 7 months because you couldn't spend $200 to get the updated test is a good idea?
With a 7-month window, I don't think it's going to make a difference.
That waiting 7 months because you couldn't spend $200 to get the updated test is
Yeah,
a
I'm
good
not
idea?
a fan of her.
With a 7-month window, I don't think it's going to make a difference.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this defense concept.
With regards to the
at all.
summary scales on the TSI, you had to actually call somebody to find out if it's required?
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's not something,
I don't want to sit up here and potentially be wrong. So absolutely, I called and verified.
okay. And with regards to the summary scales, they're not required, right?
No,
And in fact, there are instructions on how to give this test, aren't there?
I'm sorry.
Instructions on how to give the TSI?
Yes.
Okay, and in part of the instructions, it tells you how to score it, right?
In the instruction manual, yes.
And when it tells you how to score it, it also gives the TSI?
Yes.
Okay, and in part of the instructions, it tells you how to score it, right?
In the instruction manual, yes.
And when it tells you how to score it, it also tells you how to score the summary scales.
Actually, no.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, there was not a way to score the summary scales in the handwritten, in the hand score version. It was based on a confirmatory factor analysis that the test authors considered to be too, that's absolutely what I'm telling them based upon what my knowledge was and confirmation by the test publisher.
And just to be sure, the last time you gave a TSI was in 2010, right?
That's correct. And that's the one that you're referring to with the summary scales.
And you were still hand scoring in 2010?
I'm sorry.
You were still hand scoring, you gave a TSI was in 2010, right?
That's correct. And that's the one that you're referring to with the summary scales.
There's
And
not
you
that
were
many
hand scoring
questions.
in 2010?
I'm sorry.
You were still hand.
You know, she's talking about you were still hand scoring in 2010. I mean, I know it sounds
All right,
like
let's
there's
talk
a lot
about
of
coding
questions, but
profiles.
there's not. There was like
I don't-
53. There was like 53 questions or something along those lines. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not really a lot. I mean, you just sort of write down a number and add it up. I mean, we're not talking about
Yeah.
complicated math. I feel like any lawyer can handle it.
Yeah, even a lawyer can handle it. I'm not a fan of this cross-examination. She applies angry elf things here.
Yeah, and she's getting sucked into these arguments that the angry elf is making that to me aren't really relevant. What test did you use? Did you use this test? Did you use that test? You know, she's going down the line, you know, the whole you waited 7 months before you implemented this new testing procedure, blah blah blah. You don't need to make all these arguments because you know she's going to come back with a rebuttal on this, and it's just making your arguments hollow. So not a fan. Not a fan at all.
How long should this trial really have taken? 2 weeks, maybe?
Yeah, I would say 2, maybe 3 weeks at the most. And this is what, day 54?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lawyers can't do numbers unless they're on a bill. Well, I might have some clients that disagree with the bill too.
Have you heard about the lawyer who went to heaven at age 35?
No.
No, he went up there and St. Peter, he said, well, welcome. You have lived a long and prosperous life. And the lawyer goes, but I'm only 35. I haven't had time to live a long and prosperous life. Really? According to your billables, you should be 85.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I billed on the week that I had my trial. I billed everything, and I looked at my total time for the end of the week, and it said 101 hours that I billed. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. And then I didn't think about it. And then my my CFO came to me and I said, I billed 101 hours. She's like, no, the way we do some of our printing fees look like hours in our thing. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Cause I'm like, I don't remember like working 101 hours in 1 week. I feel like I'd be dead right now. But I was like, that was a lot of work. But yeah. Anyway, so that's my hourly story. So apparently, yeah, I would be like 90 right now if I was going off my billable hours.
No. There are 19 minutes left of this stream. I think we should go through this day.
Sure, I'm good with that.
About floating?
Floating profiles, okay. You were asked questions about floating profiles. Give me a second.
I'm playing it in 1.5, so we.
And you referred to research that was, or an article that was published by Dr. Gatchell. He was one of the authors, right? In 2006, you said?
Yes. The one that I was looking at was first published by, the first author was Haggard.
Haggard, right? And another author was Sowell.
And then Gatchell was at the end because he's probably the main man. Once you get to be of a certain stature, you take last author instead of first.
Sowell.
And then Gatchell was at the end because he's probably the main man. Once you get to be of a certain stature, you take last author instead of first.
With regard to floating profiles, didn't he?
His seminal work on it was in 2006.
I'm sorry?
His seminal work on floating profiles was in 2006. The article that you're holding is in 2008. And so, yes, he had done another study on it.
So he did another study in 2008 after 2006.
That's correct.
Okay. And in that study, he talks about how he doesn't refer to floating profiles anymore. He changes the name to disability profiles, doesn't he?
I brought a copy.
Do you need to refer to it?
If you don't mind.
No, that's fine. I just have to mark it down.
It's probably the same as yours. You want to see?
Yeah, I just have to mark it.
Or wait, no.
I'm handing you back to mark as exhibit 65.
Thank you.
All right, and so this. So I'm handing you back to mark as exhibit 65.
Thank you.
All right, and so this
This
article
stream would
was
have
by
been
Dr. Gatchell in 2008, right?
That's correct.
And at the front of this article, on the top page, or on the top of the page is, what's that called when you have a little paragraph like that?
I'm sorry?
On the top of the first page, what's that called when you have that little first paragraph?
The abstract.
Okay, and the abstract is like a summary of what the article is about, right?
That's right.
And in the abstract, he specifically refers to the floating profile as it's been formally known, right?
As it's been.
Implications in the context of pain management, right?
Yes, because that was the population with whom he worked.
Right. And so he was working with the population with regard to people in pain management.
In what?
In pain management.
Yes.
Okay. And he now calls it, as of 2008, he calls it a disability profile, doesn't he?
He calls it a disability profile, but it's still the same thing. Whether it's a Chevy or a Ford, it's still a car.
Right. But Dr. Marti didn't call it a disability profile, right? She called it a floating profile.
Yes.
Okay. But Dr. Gatchell is now calling it a disability profile, right?
Only as it applies to his spinal disorder patients. He had COSD patients, and you can actually see it in two different places in the article.
Well, in this particular article, though, he is talking about his patient population of pain management people, right?
Yes.
And these pain management people also had, some of them had borderline personality too, right?
Absolutely.
And so the fact that they had both, you can't just ignore that Dr. Gatchell is talking about the pain management. That's his population that he's dealing with, right?
You have to look and see what population is being written upon in order to make any sense of the study.
Okay, and so the population that he is writing about is pain management, not a population of borderline.
The population that he's writing about is patients who he's seeing for pain management, but who also had many. The population that he's writing about is patients who he's seeing for pain management, but who also had, many of them had borderline personality disorder.
Along with the pain management, right?
Correct.
And he was treating them for pain management.
That was the reason that he was seeing them, yes.
Okay, and so it just so happened that some of them also had borderline as well.
I don't think it just so happened. What he noticed was that this kind of inner emotional turmoil and turbulence that a person.
That just ended abruptly. Something's up with this recording. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Something's going on.
You have questions about PDS scale, right?
I hope that doesn't show up because on day 55 is jury instructions and closing arguments. These are the final witnesses.
We're going to be repeating a lot, I have a feeling. Maybe we'll go through and take a look and see if it does this.
Yeah.
The PDS test.
Yes.
And you didn't review that as part of getting ready to testify?
No.
And you asked questions about whether or not if a person lied about the trauma, that would cause problems for you believing the rest of the test.
Yes, it's common sense. Yes.
Okay. But if the person lied about how the trauma occurred, but there's still a trauma, then that doesn't necessarily invalidate the rest of the test, does it?
If you presuppose that the person who is answering is telling you the truth about everything else, then it wouldn't invalidate it. But if you presuppose that if the person would lie once, it's the potential that they would lie again, then there would be some significant questions about it.
And you don't know either, right?
I'm sorry?
You don't know either.
Honestly, if you know absolutely for sure that a person's lying at one time, how do you know that they're telling the truth when all of the rest of the questions are subjective?
Well, let me ask you this. When we're talking about a trauma, and we're talking about the PDS, and we're talking about the effects, or whether or not the person meets the criteria for post-traumatic stress, right? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. So if we're talking about a trauma, and the person writes down on the test that the trauma was caused by being attacked by a bear, and then later says, oh, I was wrong. It wasn't a bear, I lied. It was a tiger. Is that going to, in your opinion, does that invalidate the rest of the test? Or the results of the test, I should say.
So what I hear you saying is that the person is saying at time one that it was a bear that attacked him, and at time two it was a tiger that attacked him.
Yes, but the attack still existed.
I would be very concerned because what you're looking at is time two it was a tiger that attacked him.
Yes, but the attack still existed.
I would be very concerned because what you're looking at is the seminal event. The event that occurred that is causing this person. I mean, if you look at the gateway criteria for PTSD, the person has to be involved in an event that causes them to experience intense helplessness, horror, in which they feel like their lives or the lives of others might be at risk.
Right.
And certainly that would apply whether you are being attacked by a bear or whether you're being attacked by a tiger or
so either one of those
predatory animal you want to use.
Okay, so either one, whether it's a tiger or a bear, the person can.
The initial seminal event was a lie, self-report. If you know that the initial.
This tiger attack and bear attack is a bad analogy because in one, when she talked about the ninjas, they attacked the both of them. In the other scenario, she is attacking Travis. It's two completely different scenarios.
Yeah, but remember, her story is that Travis was attacking her and she had to defend herself.
Yeah.
Seminal event was a lie. Then how do you know that all of the symptoms that are supposed to have stem
about a tiger being attacked by a tiger? Let's assume for a second that that's not true, and then let's assume that the event changes and it's a bear that actually attacked. The person is still going through an attack, right?
Oh my God, these hypotheticals are stupid.
And the person, if they're still going through an attack, whether it's a tiger or a bear, is going to still feel those feelings of helplessness and terror, things like that, presumably, right?
If you're mauled by a tiger and you're mauled by a bear, you've got incontrovertible proof. I mean, you get claw marks and things like that. And so
why are we talking about this?
And is presupposing that there is an absolute seminal event that has occurred.
Right.
And so in that case, maybe the person, I mean, if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, had a misperception. And so certainly the symptoms could still be there. But again.
So let me stop you there. The symptoms, so whether it's a tiger or bear, you would agree that the symptoms are still there if there's an attack, right?
If you have incontrovertible proof that the person had been mauled, like the claw marks and things like that, then sure.
Well, when people report traumas on PTSD or TSIs, you don't always have incontrovertible proof, do you?
No, but I also don't always see people lying.
That doesn't invalidate test just because you don't have incontrovertible proof.
What I think you're mixing things up a little bit. One is the issue of lying about the seminal event. And what I was saying is if you know that the person is lying about the seminal event, but they have incontrovertible proof like the claw marks, then clearly you could still have the difficulties. But if it's a situation where there isn't incontrovertible proof, then and you're basically having to take the person's word at face value that he or she experienced this event, then there's no...
we have a dead body, woman. We do have a dead body.
To make sure that it actually happened.
And so when we talk about objective data, you would want to look to other tests also, right?
Well, the test, it literally is one piece of the puzzle. Exactly. You want to look to more. You want to look to the person's records, to collateral interviews, to your forensic interview, to the observations that you see.
And you can also look at other tests, can't you?
Absolutely.
And you would do that, wouldn't you? You would conduct other tests besides just a PDS, wouldn't you?
Let me just clarify. When Mr. Martinez had asked me that question, he was asking me related to if you knew the person lied on test A, the
I'm
first
not
one that you
talking
gave.
about, I'm not talking about
That's why
lying.
I'm confused about what you're asking me.
Okay, I'm not talking about lying. I'm talking about the fact that if you're not sure if you can trust the results of a PDS test showing that the criteria is supporting PTSD, okay, if you're not sure about that, there are other objective tests that can tell you or give you a working hypothesis for PTSD, aren't there?
Are we getting off the topic of lying about the Seminole
I'm
event?
not talking about lying at all.
Okay.
I'm not talking
Okay.
about tigers and bears.
I wasn't sure if you switched topics or we were still on tigers, bears, and lying.
No, we're done with tigers and bears. So the question is if you, I'm just talking about if you're concerned about the PDS test and whether or not you can trust its results, there are other tests that are objective that can also give us a working hypothesis that supports PTSD, aren't there?
Definitely.
Okay. All right. And if you have other objective tests that give you a working hypothesis that supports anxiety or PTSD or trauma, you can't just ignore those, right? You need to look at those tests, don't you?
Yes.
And consider those in your evaluation.
Yes.
You told us that you, as of the last 4 years, you're about 50-50 testifying for prosecution and defense?
Yes.
And you've testified or worked on 4 capital cases, is that right? Last 4 years, you're about 50-50 testifying for prosecution and defense?
Yes.
And you've testified or worked on 4 capital cases, is that right?
Yes.
And that's death penalty cases?
Yes. And I think 2 were in the penalty phase and 2 were in the guilt phase. And then I wasn't sure when I told you yesterday, I think some of on the other side, I think 3 were murders. I'm not sure if they were charged as first degrees because like in one of them, they weren't competent to stand, the individual wasn't competent to stand trial. And so I'm not positive what the, not
Whether they were
positive,
capital or not, is that
100% sure of.
Okay. And in those 4 capital cases, and this is what we had discussed last night, that occurred in the last about 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. And in that last 4 years, you testified?
Actually, it was a little bit more because one of the ones that I was thinking of was more than 4 years because I was back.
Last night, that occurred in the last about 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. And in that last 4 years, you testified?
Actually, it was a little bit more because one of the ones that I was thinking of was more than 4 years because I was back at my list of cases.
Jumping back all the
Okay.
time.
A little bit more than 4 years. And out of those 4 cases that we're talking about, you testified for the prosecution in all of those, right?
I was retained on behalf of the prosecution, yes.
Okay. And you told us that you were originally licensed in 1999?
That's right.
So that would put you at practicing for about 14 years. Is that right?
About,
I know it's hard you were licensed as practicing, would you?
I would say that I had experience. In my personal opinion, the way that I would handle that is I would say, well, I've had experience because like, for example, I've had experience working with police officers since after my first master's degree, but I wasn't licensed. And so I wouldn't say that I practiced in that area because to me, saying that you practice pre-assumes that you have a license.
Okay. So you would.
Okay, so now there she's going back to Mr. March, claiming she practiced psychology for that long, but she wasn't licensed.
Okay.
Say that you've practiced psychology until after you had your license, right?
I wouldn't, some other folks may, but it wouldn't be my choice of terms.
You wouldn't do it?
No.
All right, thank you, Nathan.
Redirect.
With regard to the PDS and the tiger and the bear, and assuming that the individual first says it's a tiger, it's a lie, and then changes it to a bear. Assume that, which was the question you were being asked, okay?
Yes.
What if previous to that, they said it was a gopher? Would that even make it difficult for you to continue on with that test and say that it's valid?
I was actually with you at just tiger and bear saying it's invalid if there's actually no physical symptoms or anything to suggest that it was a tiger bear. If you add a gopher, then, it's just further confirmatory evidence that the person lies.
And does that talk or speak to the validity of that PDS result?
Absolutely.
And what does it speak to? What does it say?
Again, if what you're basing your opinion on is, or what you're getting the results of, you're adding up the check boxes and things. If the event either didn't occur or didn't occur how the person said it did, well, then you can't be sure that the alleged symptoms are actually true.
And as in my example, first it's a gopher, changed it to the bear, and then changed it to the tiger. Again, does that give you any pause in deciding whether or not to consider that test valid?
I think that's just common sense, yes.
And with regard to these floating profiles in the article that you were shown, does that article indicate that the concept of floating profiles as it is applied to the area of borderline personality disorder is something that should be out the window?
No, and in fact, the author is quite clear that he just termed it disability profile because of the patient population that he was working with. He didn't say don't use floating. In fact, just changing the name doesn't change anything. And in fact, he said this actually was the best way to tell whether there were certain treatment complications and treatment usage and things. It actually was validated by him.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Any questions from the jury for this witness? You may step down.
Thank you.
Any other testimony, counsel?
Statements.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience and staying tonight so that we could finish the testimony. Tomorrow morning, please be here
All
at
stayed late.
9:15. We will start at 9:30, but I would like you to be here at 9:15.
Did we learn anything from
Please
today's
do the admission.
testimony? Did
Have
we
an-
gain any insight? The only thing I will say is that the mustachioed psychologist, Dr. Mustache, he did, I liked his testimony. I found it credible. I liked what he had to say regarding the, just because he's shot in the head doesn't mean he can't get up and walk around. That seemed to be unrefuted by the next 2 witnesses called. That position is still unrefuted because they don't have any knowledge or basis. They haven't done any research on it. Has no facts to establish that what Travis's brain, the state of it, was actually at the time. So, so I felt like that was good, but is that enough? Probably not.
No, because the facts in the case are still she ended him, and there really isn't. All the things Jodi tried to slander Alexander with, or Travis with, it just didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, we still have to go into the she tries to manifest Travis being a abusive boyfriend or something like that. It's just not credible. But her whole timeline that he was shot first and then he kept coming after her, and so she stabby. I thought this witness, or the earlier Dr. Mustache, did a good job of establishing that that's possible. And I don't think that was properly refuted or rebutted. So that's about it that I took from this entire day of testimony, all the way through day 54.
Yeah.
The rest of it was nonsense.
But next Saturday, we are starting with closing arguments.
Ooh. How long are closing arguments? How long do each? Are we going to be able to get through a closing argument in one stream?
Nope. Because closing argument, first jury instruction, closing argument on day 55. Day 56 is rebuttal, closing argument, and jury selection.
Oh my God.
And those 2 days are a combined 8.5 hours.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah, but I would assume jury instructions, I mean...
We could skip jury instructions.
Yeah, we could.
I think we'll skip that.
Yeah, we will go directly.
If it was a live trial and there was something interesting about the jury instructions, like if the trial was going on now, I say let's hit them, but we'll skip those.
Yeah, so next week you cannot miss tuning in on this.
Yes, closing.
Because I have a notion it will be higher from both sides.
Okay.
I haven't watched it, so I don't know.
I don't know either. I haven't watched it either. I never watched this case when it was live, and I'm just watching this for the first time as we're doing it. The only time I watched ahead was when we had to prepare some games. But all right, cool. Well, I think I'm sending you guys, if you're watching on my channel, I'm sending you all to my evening stream. So you guys can just click the notification and you know where it's at because it's a different channel. It's the Lego stream. If you want to watch it, click the notification and then come back in a few hours and I'll be there streaming away.
Yep. And I will send you over there as well. But join me at 7 p.m. US Eastern for the last grifting stream I can have before my trip to the United States.
Cool.
Will be some unboxing and you pay me to drink.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I will see you all later today. And yeah, have a nice day.
Have a good one.
Bye.
In a little town where things aren't what they seem, lived a girl named Jodi with a tricky little scheme. She went to the courtroom where she told a little lie, but the truth came out. Oh my, it wasn't ninjas or pirates, as she tried to claim. Jodi was the culprit, she was the one to